So I've got two greenhouses, and currently I've got one configured with a hydroponic setup. As you can see over here, I have an electrical power point and an extension cord running across to a pump. The electric power point has a smart switch in it, so it's linked to the home network on a time device to run the pump at certain times of the day. And you can see here, this is the reservoir that holds the water that pumps, that has a pump in it. What it does, it pumps the water up the 15mm PVC and into the top of my hydroponics configuration. And what that then does, it runs the water all through the snake, and it runs all the way back into the original source of water. And so basically what we've got here is a setup of strawberries being automatically watered with no hands on. Now the issue I had previously was I tried getting it running in the greenhouses in pots, but unfortunately the yields were quite poor. I always had the intention of setting up this hydroponics setup, so now's my time to do it. But what I'm doing today, I'm setting up my secondary greenhouse, and I'm going to put some hydroponics in here. So as you can see here, I've got some shelving. I'm going to do the configuration slightly differently. What I do need to do, I'm going to put some tomatoes and zucchinis and some bigger bushier plants in here, so the density is not going to be as high as the strawberry configuration. I've got the piping here, I've got the tools in the house, and I'll show you how it's done, and hopefully at the end of the day we'll show how it all pans out. So I've laid the configuration out onto the grass now. What I've done, like the strawberries, I've marked out 25cm intervals for my little pots. I don't plan to have the tomatoes at 25cm intervals, but just in case I want to repurpose this for strawberries at a later stage. So if you're interested in a relatively budget hole saw kit that you can buy, Bunnings sells this 16-piece hole saw kit from Craft Right in the tools section. It's quite handy if you ever need it to use it for any other jobs, and if you were doing smaller baskets, of course you'd have the flexibility to use whatever size is appropriate to your project. I think this was about $10, $15, maybe $20 for Bunnings when I bought it. So this is what I'm going to use to drill the holes required to fit the baskets. It's called a hole saw. There's a little kit that you can buy from Bunnings with multiple pieces in there. Obviously this one here has got quite a few different sizes. If you've never seen this before, it's quite easy to fit. A little bit of fiddling around putting it on the end of the drill piece. I've already drilled guide holes into the PVC, ready to go, and what I'm going to just do is sink this drill straight through. So you can see here I've managed to drill with the hole saw a fairly neat hole. You can see here the other slot which I'm about to do, which is the guide hole. I'll try and show you how this is done. It's actually quite a noisy thing to do. It's important to wear gloves because the hole saw can be quite sharp. So just a top down pressure. You don't want to press too hard, otherwise it tends to grab, and off you go. There you go, a bit of a messy job, but a reasonably nice hole there. So I've just finished working with the hole saw, cutting all the holes through the pipe work here, ready for the little baskets to be popped in. I think one of the key points here is really, rather than trying to do the hole saw with one hand, you need two hands, hold it tight and an even pressure from the top, and it tends not to grab so much, but you do have to be wary because occasionally it does and it pops out. So make sure you've got gloves on, because the little sharp bits on the side here are quite difficult, and sometimes you get the little white PVC tag stuck inside, so you just need a screwdriver to lever that out. Some of them just drop straight through and others get quite stuck. What I do recommend too is you tend to keep a couple of these plastic leftovers. You can, when you put them into your setup, to level the piping so that the water's flowing nice and even, you can set them underneath the pipes with a leveler to make sure the water's flowing straight across rather than on an angle if there's a slight incline on your setup. So as you can see here with the basket, we can pop one of these in. It's just one that I bought from one of the nurseries in Queensland online, about 50 at a time, and it slots in quite nicely. So what will happen is once that's filled up with potting mix, it'll sit quite well into the water, and what happens is that when you fill up the pipe, it comes up to a certain level, and then the idea is that it fills up here and then it drains out gradually. So the last thing to do obviously is just to clean up the edging. So what you can do is just use some of your residual leftover pieces, and you can run this over the edges to get the rough parts off, and then after that just use some gloves. The PVC is quite sharp, so you can just run your finger around it. It generally cleans it up pretty well. I'm just getting rid of the residual parts, and then what I do, just to make sure that you're not running little pieces of white PVC flex through your pump that'll gunk it up, is just flush it through with a bit of water before you put it all back together again, ready to go. Alright, this is the setup now after having drilled everything out. You can see on one end here I've got the cap here. I haven't actually glued it in. I found with the strawberry setup and the low pressure setup that the cap doesn't pop out at all, and it doesn't even leak. You can see here that the baskets sit quite nicely. Obviously I've got a little bit more work to do to fill up with I've got the perlite here and the cocoa peat, a bit of cocoa peat which I mix 50-50, and a bit of perlite here 50-50. Probably this time around I might use a slightly higher perlite mix rather than cocoa peat, because I found that with a strawberry mix it tends to get algae, retains the moisture more, so there's a bit of a trade-off in how often you run the system, but we'll see how it functions over summer as well. So you can see here running all along, you've got the pipe system here. This cap is the same cap. All I've done is drilled a hole here, and what I'll do is run a 15mm pipe out of the pipe here, and I'll run it into one of the holes here, or I'll drill a separate hole into here if I don't want to run it into one of the basket holes, and that will run the pipe, that will run the pump out of the water and flow it back in, so everything will flow. It'll flood the entire pipe system and then leak out of that little hole there. So we're ready to go. I just need to get the pump now, and we'll go from there.